Hi folks, this is a video on amateur and professional sport. It links in with the public schools, the rational recreation side of things, the gentleman amateur ethos of sport from those boys at public school that rationalised and then went on to codify sport as we know it today. So we'll start with that in the first instance. So what we've got is, as we know the journey now, if you know anything about the public school boys, they rationalised sport, they went on to Oxford or Cambridge, where the melting pot effect occurred, and a lot of these sports were codified, so codification again, universal laws, universal rules, which then leads you to be able to have leagues, tournaments, etc., etc. But don't forget, as soon as the sports were codified, those ex-public school boys also set up national governing bodies, NGBs. Okay, so organisations to govern the rules and govern these sports, and they embedded in the majority of them, in fact all of them, strict amateur codes. So what is an amateur? You play for the love, not for pay. Why did they do that? These are upper class people who have spent the time and effort to refine these sports and rationalise them, and they wanted to turn them into activities that they would then keep for themselves. If you make it amateur, you do keep it for yourself, because the working classes can't afford to take part in these sports. They can't afford time off to play. Okay. Equally, the thought of being paid to play to boys like this, to chaps like this, was vulgar and crass. That doesn't conform to their ideals. And what was their underlying concept and value? It was athleticism. Okay. So athleticism, remember, physical endeavour and moral integrity. Things like playing hard but playing fair. That was physical endeavour. But moral integrity, fair play, sportsmanship, honour, respect for your opponents and your officials. The public school boys were of the opinion that as soon as you bring money into sport and you start making the win more important than the taking part, you will lose these two things, particularly the moral integrity. People will start to cheat, they will start to use deviancy in order, because the pressure to succeed has now increased. So that's why amateurs were there right at the start, and that's why many of the sports in this country remained amateur for such a long period of time. Technically, athletics and swimming and things like that, they're still amateur sports. They do not get salaried to take part in the sports. They can get sponsorship, they can get lifestyle funding, they can get endorsements and sports aid and task grants, but they do not get a salary. Some of the sports, because rugby union didn't go professional in this sport, in this country, until the mid-1990s. So a lot of sports set up by these ex-public school boys have had strict amateur codes embedded into them. So I suppose the point is, how did we ever get to the point where we had professionals and working class people taking part in sport and becoming professional performers? Well, for that, watch the video on public schools and the rational recreation, because you'll see about the spread through these public school boys becoming industrialists and setting up work teams to increase the health and fitness and productivity of their workforces. These boys going off and getting high-ranking positions in the army and spreading these sports across the British Empire, getting high-ranking positions in the church, and spreading sport through this idea of muscular Christianity through into Sunday school system and Sunday leagues and things like that. And that's kind of how it ends up spreading from upper class amateurs into the entire population. And also the contract to compete video to do with sportsmanship and gamesmanship. So these videos are all linked together, so it makes sense to watch them one after the other or in sequence, and you'll soon start to be able to put all the information together. Hope you found it useful, folks. So with that in mind, let's just get a proper definition down of a professional performer. So professionals are paid to play or compete. That's the definition of a professional. I think the problem is we use the word amateur for someone who can't play the sport. The exact opposite. We've got amateur performers who compete at Olympics in this country. They are not paid to play. Whereas professional performers, such as in football and rugby and things like that, they are paid professionals. They are salaried. They are paid to play and compete. And professionalism undoubtedly increased during the 20th century. Why? Well, we've mentioned, works teams, church teams. I could mention the British Empire, but I'm not going to go over old ground. It all comes about through extra commercialism. Just realised I missed a little R out there, forgive my spelling. It's not difficult when you think back to the time. You've got two factory teams that ex-public school boys have set up, two different factories in the same city. So they start playing each other just, on a Saturday afternoon. and and they start to draw a crowd. But then suddenly, as soon as the crowd is watching, the pressure to perform well is on, because they might associate the effectiveness of your sports team with the effectiveness of your factory and the products that they make. So you then start employing people in your factory who are good players, and you pay them bonuses for when they play particularly well on a weekend. And suddenly, as soon as you've done that, you've crossed the line. You've gone into the realm of professional sport. You are paying people to take part. And after a while, these clubs become self-funding. You start to charge these spectators to come and watch your high-standard performers, and that money covers the cost of wages, and suddenly you've got a professional football team. Now, I say suddenly, it takes years and decades, but that is exactly what happens, and that's how professional sport develops. So this is just a really brief video covering those two aspects, differences between amateurs and professionals. The key things that you need to remember are sport was rationalised for the upper classes with strict amateur codes so that the upper classes could keep it for themselves, and that limits participation for working class people. Over time, though, these ex-public school boys who are now leading society realise the potential for teaching sport to the working classes, how it's going to improve their health and fitness and improve their productivity and improve their teamwork and communication in the army, in factories, in society. And it's not before long that they start setting up these teams, and these teams play against each other with the increased transport links brought on by the Industrial Revolution. And suddenly then the pressure to perform well is on, and as I said, you start to pay people for good play, and then you've got professionals. Okay, other questions that could come up that have been dealt with in similar videos is, has professionalism, is it ruined the contract to compete? You know, arguments for and against that you've got to be aware of. So have a look at the videos related to amateurism and professionalism that I've done in terms of public schools,